All right. Hope everyone is doing well on this Sunday afternoon. All right. So, y'all know the drill. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to put it in the comments section or in the chat below, and I will get to it. My apologies also for starting a little bit late. Just making sure my connection is going okay. All right. So I today I'm going to start talking a little bit, giving you guys a little bit of an update to everything. But before I go into that update, I just want to thank everybody for the support. Thank everybody for just all the likes, the shares, the subscribers. It's been really great, overwhelming in terms of all the support that you all have given me. So always want to make sure that I thank you all for that. So today, and also just a reminder, if you want full versions of the podcast, you can check out the podcast at either Apple Podcast or Spotify Podcast. Whenever we do interviews, I always want to make sure that I post those full episodes on there. So if you're interested in some of the podcasts that we do, we typically interview psychologists, neuropsychologists. I'm super excited because we're going to be having some really great guests in the future that will be able to do a lot of just answer some really good questions about neuropsychology. So, super excited about that. I think that's going to be great. So, make sure to check out those podcasts either on Apple Podcast or the Spotify podcast. And then if you are looking for any either short version clips or just any other information about clinical psychology, getting into graduate school, getting ready for the application, make sure to check out my Instagram on Phil's Guide to PsyD. I typically will post out just little clips and videos and resources on there. So you can check out Phil's Guide to PsyD. You can check out the podcast. And then, of course, if you ever have any questions or comments, please feel free to put it in the comment section below. I do my best to read all the comments. So if there are any comments or questions, please feel free to put it out in the comment section and I'll take a look at that and I'll try and get back to you as quickly as possible. So that will be what I'll try and do. So today I will go over a little bit of just the general overview of finishing my last semester of grad school. I will be officially getting done in May in terms of the last grad school semester. And then got some good news. I'll be going into my internship or residency starting in July. So super excited about that. Very, very excited. Can't wait for that. And so I'll be doing some updates on how that interview or how that internship process is going. And then just so you all know a little bit of the format, I know I talk about this all the time, but typically for PsyD school, it's around 4 years of grad school of just like the classes mixed in with some clinical practicum sites. And then you do that 1 year internship. And so that is about what I'm going to do next is going to be the internship. And then after the internship, I will be fully graduated and I'll officially have that degree. So that's kind of what we're looking into. So just in case you're wondering where I'm at in the process, that is pretty much typically where I'm at. So, super excited to go into that. Now, for today, have a few questions that you all have been giving me that I will go through. I've been getting these questions from Instagram, been getting these questions from people who have been emailing me and just hitting me up. And so I'll go through these questions. But again, if you have any other questions that you want me to go through, that you are just burning to get answered, this is definitely the time to ask those questions in the comment section. And I will make sure to take a look at that and go through that as well. So, as I go into the internship process, some people have been asking me about the internship process. So, I talked a little bit about the internship process in the last live stream, but typically in your fourth year of grad school, you go into the internship process. You are trying to figure out what schools or what programs or where you essentially want to do your residency or your internship. And I was able to turn in all my applications in I think it was November, and then I started getting interviews in December, and then January I finished up those interviews this year, and then February was where I found out about where I was going to be matched, and then yeah, now March, April, I've been just going through the onboarding process for where I'm going to be. So it is a long process. You go through a lot of just finding letters of recommendation from either professors or faculty members or staff members or clinical supervisors. And then you do write a personal statement. You do have 5 prompts in terms of the essay prompts that they want you to write. And then you also have to prepare for the interview. So it is a lengthy process, but it does go by pretty quickly. So once you go through those interview questions and once you go through the interview, you do have a waiting period where you have to wait and find out where you match. And the matching is a whole algorithm process. And I think you rank the sites that you've interviewed. And so I think I ranked the sites that my top sites that I wanted to go to. And then I believe it was like either the second or third week of February, you find out where you've matched, and either it's an email or some type of notification through this platform where you find out where you've been matched. And so it's a long process, but I'm very thankful to have gone through that process. So it can be intense. I will definitely put out more specific videos about that process, and I'll kind of divide it up into different parts, and so that for people who are getting ready for that internship process or getting ready for that matching process, you'll be able to see the parts of the videos in terms of what will be the most helpful for you in terms of getting matched and hopefully getting your top choice in terms of your internship, going into that internship, and then getting ready for licensure after that. So that is typically the general process of the internship. As I mentioned before, I will make sure to do some type of like multiple different parts of a video to go through each step of the process for the internship. And then that way you can figure out what is going to be the most helpful, what's going to be the most needed for you, and then finally go through that process. All right. So I'm going to go on my phone because I've been getting certain questions about just different parts of the application process in general for clinical psychology. I will be posting a webinar series very soon that will go over in total just the whole process of getting into grad school. So that starts from your personal statement, that starts from your CV, that goes also not just into your CV and into your personal statement, but figuring out how to get letters of recommendation and then also getting prepared for the interview questions that you might get, and then hopefully some different trips or different tricks and tips to getting relevant clinical experience as well as research experience as well. So that is essentially what I'm going to be going through in the webinar series, and so I'll be posting that very soon. And yeah, I see from the comment section we got a school psychologist over here. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for coming through. If you have any questions, please feel free to put down any questions that you have below. But it's always good to see another clinician. And so, yeah, super excited about some of the future things that we're going to be doing on the channel. And we're going to be having some neuroscientists come in. We're going to be having some neuropsychologists come in, a few more psychiatrists and other psychologists in different types of specialties. If you have anyone in mind that you'd like me to interview or that you want me to interview, just let me know. You can feel free to reach out to me. As I mentioned, you can reach out to me in all different types of platforms, whether it's on Phil's Guide to PsyD on the Instagram or on YouTube or on my website at philsarpon.com. So lots of different ways to reach out to me, but I'm super, super excited about that. And I'm going to go through one of the questions that we have in the Instagram. Someone that sent me a message over there. And the question was specifically about the application season. So, in terms of if you are applying to grad school this summer or essentially this year, when should you put in your application? And I always encourage people to put in their application as quickly as possible. The reason being, and this is from my own personal experience, when I was first applying to grad school, I didn't realize all of the process and all of the things that it takes to actually put in your application. And one of the things that was unfortunate for me was that I realized that in one of the schools that I applied to, I didn't actually turn in the application fully. And so, there was a situation that happened where I believe the school reached out to me. They mentioned that I didn't actually fully turn in my application and that I needed to go back into the platform and actually hit submit. So, just so you know, it's always best to apply early just in case situations like that will happen. All right. So, all right. So, we got a few questions here in the chat. I'm going to go through that. Says, hey, Phil, can you explain the intensity level from the transition to a clinical psychology doctoral program from a counseling or master's? Yeah, absolutely. So I would say the transition to a clinical psychology doctoral program from a counseling or master's program is actually very similar. I don't know if anyone can attest to this, but for me, my master's program was more intense than the doctoral program itself in different ways. So it really does depend on what type of master's you have. If you have a master's in psychology or clinical psychology or counseling psychology, my guess is that it's going to be very similar to your experience when you get into the doctoral program. When you go through your master's thesis, in some sense, that's very similar to the dissertation defense or the dissertation process itself when you get into your doctoral program. Overall, I think with the doctoral program, the level of intensity is that there's just a lot more things that you have to do. You might have to do supervision. You have your practicum clinical sites. You have your research. You have your teaching assisting. You have your dissertation. You have your classes. You have your presentations. So I think in the doctoral level classes or intensity itself, there's just more things that you have to do versus your master's level courses. So I would say the transition isn't too bad, but just be aware that you're just going to have to probably do a lot more things that are going to take up a little bit more of your time and might strain you a little bit. But if you've already built for yourself some discipline and time management skills in your counseling program or in your master's program, you should be able to go through that transition fairly well. All right, so the next question is, I'm interested in human factors engineering psychology. Have you done a video on this? I personally have not done a video on engineering psychology. I've heard some things about it and I've read up on a few things about it in terms of some research articles, but I have not done a full video on that. I think that's a really interesting topic. So I'll have to look into that. I'll definitely have to look into that. Maybe I can find somebody to come to share a little bit about engineering psychology. But yeah, no, that's a great question. All right, so we have another comment. I am planning to go into field placement soon for individuals with traumatic brain injury within my master's program. And I would like to do neuro counseling, but I'm worried about the workload while working and going to school. So yeah, that's a great question. A lot of people when they start grad school, especially for clinical or counseling psychology programs, whether PhD or PsyD, most students are trying to figure out if they can work part-time or not and be a full-time student. And what I'll tell you, and I'll share from my own personal experience, I do think, in my own opinion, that it's very doable to work part time and be a full time student, especially in the first or second year of grad school. And I think I've seen lot of students do it. I've seen a lot of students actually work part time in their first year, second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year, and sixth year. So I've seen students work through their grad school program all the way through, and maybe they've cut back on certain hours depending on how busy they were with their graduate school program. So, for example, I think for me, my first year, I was working probably part time around 15 hours. And then the second year, I cut back to 10 hours working part time. Third year, I was able to go back to 15 hours part time. And then the fourth year has been back and forth between 10 to 15 hours a week. If you're working anywhere from 20 to 40 hours and still also going into a full-time student position, I think that is really, really intense. And I've seen a lot of people burn out from that. And so if you can if you can schedule your time between 15 to 20 hours, depending on the year and depending on what you're doing in terms of your graduate school program, I think it's very, very doable to do that. But I would, if you're going into a part time position, try and get a job that has really flexible hours. I know a lot of people who will work as part time teaching assistants or part time research assistants, or they'll have some type of part time job that has some flexibility in terms of the hours of work that they have to do per week. And so, if you have that part time flexible schedule, I think that is probably the best way to go, because then you can schedule your hours around school, around clinicals, around dissertation time. And then I've also had people who just do full time school, and because of family stuff and other different responsibilities that they have, their workload is more than enough. And so it depends on how you schedule your time. It depends on your time management skills, but I think it's very doable to have a part-time job and to also be a full-time student. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend having a full-time job and being a full-time student. I just haven't seen that done quite as frequently or as often. And I don't even know if, from a mental health perspective, if that's recommended. So just be aware of that. And then, yeah, the other question was also for post masters. Yeah, as I mentioned before, I think whether it's the master's or whether it's a doctorate, I think part time work can be very doable if you have good time management skills, and if you also are able to kind of, one thing that I've seen students do is the first semester, they don't work part-time at all, and they just focus on school. They focus on getting good grades, and they focus on how they feel after the first semester. And then after the first semester, once they've gone through that semester, they're able to kind of figure out their work-life balance, and they're also able to figure out their schedule too. And they're also able to figure out, okay, now that I'm transitioning into grad school, I can fully focus my time on grad school for this first semester. And then the spring semester, I can start to include some hours into part time work. So I've seen it done that way before. But at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're always going to be prioritizing school, because that is the whole purpose of going into grad school in the first place. So we have another question. Let's see. Do you know if there's much tuition reimbursement for people who teach within their doctoral program? I've heard it done in a certain PhD programs, but not sure if it's necessarily applicable within. Yeah, that is a really great question. So I think it would probably depend on the school. I think when it comes to tuition reimbursement, I've heard of programs where, if you are an employee or you have some type of connection to that school, they might do 80% reimbursement, 90% reimbursement, maybe sometimes even 100% reimbursement on tuition for that following semester. So there are programs that will advocate that, or will kind of essentially emphasize that within their program. So I'm not sure about the specific names of those programs, so you'll have to kind of do some research on that. But I do think that's definitely possible. Now, in terms of people who actually teach within their doctoral program, So teaching and going to actually taking classes at the same time, I'm not so sure about that. I haven't heard that done before, but I wouldn't be surprised, especially for PhD programs. The thing about PhD programs, because they can be funded through grants or just through other funding resources, they tend to have a lot of extra money, not only for their students, but also for their faculty. So if you're teaching a course or you are a teaching assistant for one of these programs, I'm sure that there can be some grant money that can be allocated for students in terms of their tuition as well. So I that wouldn't surprise me in terms of that. I think that would definitely make a lot of sense. So if you're looking into that in terms of how to pay off your tuition, I think that would be a great thing to look into. The other thing that you can do, and I've done several videos on this in terms of paying back student loans or paying for tuition, is that there is the military option, and we've had some people that have come in and that have talked extensively about getting into the military, whether it's the Navy, whether it's the Army, whether it's the Marine Forces, and having the military actually pay off fully their tuition and also give them additional stipend. Now, the thing about this is that in order to do this, you typically have to have some type of commitment to the military after your graduate school program. This could be for 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, 10 years. It really just depends. But I know a lot of people who have paid off their tuition or have paid off their student loans going through the military option. There's also different scholarships that your school can give. And that would probably be my first question that I would ask if you're looking to apply to grad school is how are students actually paying for this, right? And if there are scholarship opportunities that these programs are also giving their students. So I think that's really important to ask those questions as well, either in the interview day or typically they have a finance department that you can email those questions directly to them. And hopefully they get back to you about pretty much paying off grad school. There are other things you can do, whether being a teaching assistant or research assistant, a part time job, as I mentioned before. But typically, if you are a teaching assistant or a research assistant, there might be some other benefits in terms of being an employee for the school that you can also get at the same time. I also know of students working at their gym, whether in their recreational center. Super easy job. You just sit at the desk, you check people in, and you can literally do homework at the same time. I also know people who work in their library, in the institution's library, and it's the same thing. They're like literally just sitting there at the library, still being able to do homework while getting paid at the same time. Sometimes people go into IT positions, and so there's a lot of different options in terms of paying for some of that school tuition that you can look into as well. Now, for me, as I'm going into internship or residency, this is just a heads up for people who are looking forward to this. I think internship and residency, in terms of the stipend that they give students, is anywhere from 25,000 to 37,000. But I also still know of students who are going to still be taking out student loans even during their internship, because typically internship they don't give funds for travel, relocations, or anything like that. And sometimes, even though they might give you a $25,000 stipend, that is still before taxes. And so you might be getting a stipend, but there's still going to be taxes that are going to be taken away from it. If you need health insurance, they're still going to take away money from that. And so I've had a lot of people who realize that a 25K actually ends up being more like 19 or 18 once taxes or once health funds are taken away from that. And so sometimes they actually might need more student loans to supplement, or they might have to do a part-time job to supplement for that as well. So when you're going into your internship interviews, ask those questions as well. Typically, those sites will have on their website the specific stipend. And I think for some places they are raising the level or the number or the salary or the stipend position for that. So there's a lot of places like the VA that are raising their stipend level for incoming interns. So definitely take a look into that. But it is, I mean, from a money perspective, from a fun perspective, paying for grad school is incredibly expensive, especially if you have your undergrad and then you go into a master's and then you go into the doctorate. Even if you're going to a PhD funded school, Typically, I think the percentage of people coming out of student loan debt is still anywhere from 50 to 150, 200,000, 200K of student loan debt. So it is important to kind of look into that. So I see we have a question. Are you informed on the salary expectations for our first year out of graduate school for both clinical psychology and neuropsychology? I know it varies from state to state. Yeah, this is a fantastic question. It is changing almost year to year basis. Just so you guys know, a little bit of a heads up. In terms of, there are some years and there are some seasons where jobs will kind of freeze hiring processes. And so if you go into an internship, and from the internship, typically, you want to go into a full-time position or even a postdoc, just be aware that sometimes it might be difficult to figure out if you want to go into a postdoc or if you want to go into a staff position. Some places might be not hiring, some places might be hiring. So just be aware of what you want to do, even as you're going into your internship. In terms of the salary expectations, so the incoming salary expectations, I will put down a link below. There is a bls.gov and even Jobs Today. There's a website called, I think, Jobs Today. I'll put down links below for those websites and those links. But typically right now, the salary for a clinical and counseling psychologist is anywhere from 80, and there's a range anywhere from 80 to 110 in terms of the starting salary positions. But it also depends on where you work. So if you're going into an academic medical setting, if you're going into a VA, if you're going to a community mental health setting, it's going to vary. The other thing is that when you look online, the salary numbers that they're giving you might also be including master level therapists or clinical or counseling psychologists that have master's degrees. So you want to make sure that you go into a website that specifically is going to give the doctoral level salary numbers for either counseling or clinical psychologists that have a PhD or a PsyD specifically in the United States. If you don't go into those websites and find those specific stipulations, you're going to get other professions that mix in and that are going to water down that salary. But you can expect anywhere from, I would say, 80 to 110 in terms of a starting salary position. The postdoc is typically going to be anywhere from 50 to 70. And then after you have your salary starting position, you can absolutely negotiate a higher salary in different places. And so I think that's where I would start to look, but I'll put down some links below to check that out. All right, so we had another question. Yeah, keep the questions coming. Did you work during your doctorate program? I did, yes. And I was talking about that a little bit earlier, but I did. I worked, I'm actually currently working part-time right now as a personal trainer. So I was a personal trainer before I got into the doctoral program. I started working for myself because it was the best way for me to schedule my hours around school, around clinicals, around practicum stuff, dissertation stuff, research stuff, teaching stuff. So I pretty much plan my hours week to week on a week to week basis, where I have my clients that I see in person, and then I also do online training as well through an app. And so I send people workouts online, and then I see people in person. And I work for a gym as an independent contractor, so I pay the gym a specific cut, and then I get to bring in all my clients through my own business. And so I know a lot of people will do teaching assisting, research assisting. They'll work for a different company. They'll work as a behavioral analyst or a behavioral technician. Some people, so here's the thing. Once you get into your third year of grad school, you might be eligible to actually become a master's level therapist while you are going into your doctoral program. And you might be able to work under a psychologist and their licensure as a therapist. And so I know a lot of students who will, after their third year of their grad school program and their doctorate, they'll work under the licensure of a psychologist and be able to make money through actually seeing patients for therapy. So that's another option as well. It depends on the state specific guidelines. So you might have to look into that, but that's exactly what I do. Let's see. So we got another question. Hey, I'm going for my bachelor's in psychology, but I'm not sure on a good minor to go with. This is a great question. So it really does depend on you. I know some people that minor in neuroscience. If you're interested in neuropsychology, I know some people that minor in history or sociology, some of those behavioral health minors are not bad options as well. If you know the school that you want to apply to for your doctoral program or your master's program, you can look into some of the classes that they offer, and you can base your minor that to basically reflect some of the classes that they give. So I knew a lot of students who wanted to go into a doctoral program that focused on social justice or working with marginalized populations. And so they got a minor in like, I don't know if it was social justice related, but they got a minor in some type of law or pre-law or some type of business related focused behavioral health minor to reflect the program that they were going to apply for. So if you want to be strategic in terms of your application process, choose that minor that might reflect a potential program that you might apply to. And then that way you can speak about that in your personal statement and even in your clinical interview while you're trying to apply for those programs. All right, next question. Upcoming fourth year student in a clinical psychology PsyD program, do you have any advice for what to look for when applying to internships? Tips for finding the best fit? We'll be applying this fall. I will be putting out so much content about the internship now that I've gone through this process. And so be on the lookout for that. I would say, just in general, if you have any, in terms of what you want to specialize in, I know going through grad school, it's hard to figure out your niche. But if there is a niche that you want to go into, whether it's health psychology, neuropsychology, forensic psychology, you want to also look at all the practicum settings that you've been a part of. Have you done a lot of testing and assessment? Have you worked with children? Have you worked with adults or geriatric populations? You want to look at what your interests are and the experiences that you've gone through, and you want to paint yourself a picture of the type of psychologist or clinician that you want to be. That is going to determine most likely what places you apply for. And when you start applying for those places, you can match your interest with their specific focus. So, for example, I wanted to work in behavioral medicine and health psychology. So I picked a lot of internships that had health psychology tracks, primary care tracks, maybe a little bit of neuropsychology that were in academic medical settings and hospitals, and also the VAs. And so if you know your niche, then you can craft your personal statement, your questions, your experiences to match yourself as best as you can for those internships. I'll tell you right now, when you apply for internship, they are looking for buzzwords, right? And so if they see someone is not a fit for their program, they're automatically going to cut that person off because they have a ton of applications that they have to still go through where people are going to be a better match for their program. So if you can be strategic about matching yourself to the best program based on your experiences, I think you're going to be in a good spot. Definitely go through your essay questions as quickly as you can. Find a list of places that you want to apply to based on your experiences, and practice those mock interview questions as quickly as you can, or as early as you can, with faculty members and staff members. Don't be afraid to also ask for letters of recommendations from your supervisors as quickly and early as possible. So just to give them enough time to get it to you. And so I knew some students were kind of scrambling until the deadline. And so you definitely don't want to be in that situation. And the earlier that you apply, the better. All right. So those are some general tips, but I'll definitely be sure to make some more videos specifically on the internship process. All right, so we have another question. I worked as a psychometrician and as a group counselor at an eating disorder residential facility. Also, I minored in biology because I'm specifically interested in health psychology. That is fantastic. That's awesome. I always say the students who, even before grad school, let's say they worked in some healthcare setting, medical setting, and then when they got into grad school, they still kept up with that in terms of their practicum settings, and maybe they did some research on the side. You are essentially just crafting yourself a narrative of the type of psychologist that you want to be in. And so from even before you get into graduate school, whether it's in college or high school or your master's program or your doctoral program, try and craft yourself that narrative of all of the experiences that you're collecting. And if you can shift it into a specific niche, you're going to be in a really great position. The hard part is that you don't want to be so specific in your niche that you kind of become limited in terms of the places that you can apply to. But you want to be niche enough that you want to be able to give a lot of credit to yourself and make a really good argument for those programs to pick you. So yeah, I think that's wonderful. Next question. Did you do a master's or did you go from a bachelor's into a PsyD? Yeah, so I went from my bachelor's into a master's in health sciences. So I initially wasn't sure if I wanted to become a clinical psychologist. I actually wanted to pursue a different career. So I went into a master's with health sciences. I took a lot of biochemistry classes, chemistry classes. There were some physiology classes, genetics. It was based around health sciences, and it was in the department of a medical program. So I was doing a lot of classes with medical students. So that was my experience. I was able to get some research experience from that and just general clinical experience through that. But I also know of a lot of students, actually, a lot of people in my cohort that got their bachelor's and went straight into their doctoral program. And that is definitely doable. There's a lot of PsyD programs that will take incoming people who have just finished their college degree. Keep in mind that PhD can be a little bit competitive. And so a lot of those incoming students for PhD students, they may already have master's programs, but still, I mean, no matter where you're at, apply. In fact, I know a lot of students who were trying to figure out whether or not they wanted to get a master's or just go into a doctoral program, and they applied to both. So they applied to a master's program and they also applied to a doctoral program. Some of them got into a doctoral program and just went straight to the doctoral program. Some of them applied to that master's program, didn't get into the doctoral program, but because they had already applied to the master's program, they were able to just go straight into the master's program. So if you want to save as much time as possible, you can apply to both in the same year, see how you feel in terms of acceptances from either the doctoral program or the master's program, and go right into it, whether it's a doctorate or a master's. So it's completely person dependent in terms of their experiences, in terms of their level of competitiveness in terms of their application. So it really does depend, but hopefully that's helpful for you as well. So that was great. Keep the questions coming for those of you who are watching live. If not, I'll go through some of the questions that I have been getting from students. There's one thing I'll mention for me, going through the internship process. The one thing about grad school, going from year 1 to year 4, is that it can be incredibly exhausting. And so hopefully you are taking care of yourself throughout the whole process, throughout grad school. Otherwise, I know of a lot of students who got burnt out either early on or even later. And especially when you get to the internship, it definitely is a marathon in terms of the internship applications. It's like one thing after the other, after the other, after the other. And once you finally go through that internship process, you have some serious case of senioritis. And so I think the important thing is to just try your best to do things that you love to do, to take care of yourself, spend time with family, friends, relationships. Like, take care of yourself because it is a really long road, and you want to make sure that you're not burnt out right before you even start to become a clinician. So that is definitely one thing that I would recommend for myself. Even I realized that early on, that I was like, man, I got to take care of myself. All right, so we got another question. Do you know if there are salary differences with a PhD or a PsyD? Excellent question. Excellent question. So here it gets a little complicated, and maybe I can find some different websites to put in the comment section below. But the thing about this is that there used to be, right, in the 90s, early 2000s, the PsyD is a newer version of the PhD. The PhD originated based mostly on research. It was a lot of people going through a clinical psychology program and mainly doing research. And then they realized that they had a lot of these psychologists that didn't know how to do therapy essentially. So they incorporated that therapeutic component within the PhD program, but then they also created a whole separate field, which was the PsyD, where the PsyD would mainly focus on clinical therapy. For a long time, PhD programs have been more competitive than PsyD programs. They've also been programs that have been more funded, and they take less students. Sometimes they take anywhere from 4 to 5 students, where a PsyD program will take 15 students. And because they tend to be more competitive historically, they have tended to have some higher salaries in certain positions or in certain places in the US when it comes to work. So I'll give you an example of this. There are certain academic medical centers that will only take PhD students, and they will not take PsyD students. And it's not because PhD students are better than PsyD students. It's just that because they've historically only taken PhD students, and they are a research heavy institution, they will still only take PhD students. And so when you go into your internship or you're applying for internship, make sure that you are choosing places, if you're a PsyD student, that accepts PsyD students and not just PhD students. And in fact, there are going to be programs that will not market that, and they will not put that on their website that they only take PhD students. So you may even have to reach out to them specifically to those programs and ask them specifically if they do take PsyD students. Usually your programs will also know and give you advice on where to apply to, whether you're a PsyD student or a PhD student. So the answer to your question is that it becomes really complicated because there are some institutions that only will take PhD level graduate students. And because they are kind of more selective, they might tend to pay those psychologists a little bit more than PsyD psychologists. But that's rare. For the most part nowadays, whether you are a clinical psychologist, PhD, or PsyD student, or you're going into the workplace, you're going to get paid based more so on your experiences, on your level of education, your ability, your niche, and your essentially your match for that program or for that institution, more so whether or not you're a PsyD or a PhD. And so I know a lot of people who have a PsyD who were able to negotiate a higher salary than a PhD person. So it really does depend on, it's more specific on the person. I wouldn't say it's a national scale that PhD people are getting more paid than PsyD people. I think it's just PhD people are more competitive for certain faculty positions and certain clinical positions than PsyD people because of the historical framework. But it doesn't necessarily mean that overall, if you're a PhD, you're going to get paid more than a PsyD. I would say that it's really more so based on your level of experiences. If you've worked with children and you apply to a child site, they're going to choose you and they're going to pay you adequately based on your experiences versus, if you have a doctorate in PhD or a PsyD. Now, if you come from an accredited program, that's also the case. If you don't come from an accredited institution, I think that's where you see those pay differences. And so that's something to kind of keep in mind. All right. Another question. Do you or would you be able to share your list of internships that were in hospital medical settings? I am most interested in working as an integrated medical setting, but have had a hard time finding sites. So yeah. So on APIC, I think it's APPIC. You can go into that website, you can search for internships, and you can selectively choose medical hospitals. You can choose what city, you can choose some of the specific guidelines that you're looking for. And in those search options, it will give you kind of a personalized list of places that are looking or that pretty much have what you're looking for. For me, I'm a little bit unique because when I was looking for internships, I wanted to stay in the same location that I'm currently in. So I didn't apply to a lot of out of state positions or out of state internships. I wanted to essentially stay local. So I'm unique in that I only chose medical hospitals and academic medical centers in my area. But I would say that's not recommended because the if you're geographically limited, it makes it harder to match for an internship. And so it's always recommended to actually broaden out your scope or your search to other places in the United States. I know a lot of people who, if they were wanting to work with children, chose a lot of academic medical centers, whether in Chicago, in California, in Boston, New York. Texas has a lot of great academic medical centers like Baylor or and so forth. If you're looking to work with adults, specifically with food eating disorders, you can go on those websites of the internships and figure out if they have specific tracks on whether or not those places might be good to apply to. In APIC, and again, I'll do a video on this. In APIC, it also gives you the rate of people that are applying to these programs and the number of positions that are available. So you can see how competitive these programs are before you apply, right? So if you apply to a place that seems really competitive, just make sure that you might have to balance out those really competitive sites with maybe some medium sites or non-competitive sites as well. So that's something to look out for. But I will share more about resources to find the best internships in terms of medical and hospital settings. Typically, if they're APA accredited, and you feel like they have the track that you're looking for, they might be a good program. And you can also, there's a list of all the sites that students have ever applied to, and they share feedback on those sites. I'll be sure to see if I can find that as well, because that way you can see for the people who have gone through those specific sites what they thought about that site, if they like that site, if they didn't like that site, they give that feedback as well. So that might be a really good resource for you as well. All right, another question. I'm from Canada, and here no private institutions are accredited by CPA. However, it appears that students who have completed these programs are still able to apply and register to be licensed. Yeah. So for the most part, APA accredited sites, I think, are also going to be CPA accredited and approved as well. So I think you're right. For students who have completed those programs, they should still be able to apply and register to be licensed. Uh, in terms of, actually, I'm not sure about the licensure part. You might have to double check on that. I just know that from students in Canada who are wanting to come here for accredited programs, I'm pretty sure they're able to do that. I'm just not so sure about the licensure part. So I would have to double check. It says, in the US, do you see this to be the case with non-accredited programs? Are they able to still be licensed? Yeah, so non-accredited programs, whether they're CPA accredited or APA accredited, can still get licensure, specifically through the EPPP. So as long as they have a passing score on the EPPP, they can be a licensed psychologist. The only thing about that is that when they apply for job positions, those job positions might only be taking people who have gone through APA accredited programs. And so even if they're licensed psychologists, for example, I believe the VA and some academic medical centers only take APA accredited people who have gone through those institutions. So you might have a harder time getting a job just because of that, right? But there are places who they don't really care if you come from an APA accredited institution. If you're licensed, they will take you. So it just depends on where you're applying to and where you go for that. Do you know about sports neuropsychology and if colleges hire neuropsychologists for their sports teams? Wonderful question. So yeah, I'm super interested in sports psychology as well. There are some really good programs, sports psychology counseling programs. I believe there's one program in North Texas University that has, I think, a really good sports psychology program. It's a counseling psychology doctoral program that you can look into. I don't know if it's specifically neuropsychology focused. The thing about like neuropsychology is already a very specific niche. And so officially right now, I don't think there's a sub niche within neuropsychology that's sports neuropsychology. But I believe even as a neuropsychologist, like once you go through grad school, you go through maybe a neuropsychology track for a PhD or a PsyD program. You go into a neuropsychology internship. You do the 1 to 2 year postdoc of a neuropsychology or postdoc, and then you become board certified. You take that exam, you become board certified as a neuropsychologist. You can choose to work in anywhere you want. You can choose to apply to all different types of sites. And what I have heard is that a lot of sports teams will maybe hire neuropsychologists on a independent contract work basis, where they might have the neuropsychologist come to their team and do some form of assessment, whether it's TBI or coaching or consulting focused. And so I've heard more of programs, or pretty much sports programs, hiring sports psychologists in terms of contract level positions. If you want to become a sports psychologist, you can actually get a master's in sports psychology, get a certification in the CMPC certification realm, and work in sports psychology for these teams. If you want more autonomy, you can become a clinical psychologist, get a certification like the CMPC, and then still work for a lot of these sports teams. If you want to go into the neuropsychology route, I think you can probably do neuropsychology in terms of a private practice perspective. Maybe you work for a hospital, maybe you work for an academic medical setting. But this is where I think psychology is so cool, because the field is so new in terms of neuropsychology that you really can market yourself to these teams. And so if I was you, I would become a neuropsychologist and I would start reaching out to a bunch of sports teams in terms of whether or not they're looking for a neuropsychologist. Chances are in the next 5, 10, 15 years, a lot of sports teams are going to be including more specialties for neuropsychologists to come in and really niche down in specific units of sports neuropsychology or forensic neuropsychology or health neuropsychology. I think there's going to be a broader network of subspecialties that you can look into. I just don't know of any specialties right now that specifically has sport neuropsychology, but I do think it's something that you can easily create, especially if you have that doctorate or that licensure or that certification and you get some experience on your own. I think you can market yourself in that way to get that experience. All right, so we have another question. Hey Phil, just wanted to drop in for my first live video. Welcome, Ben, and love watching these, especially as I have completing my own PsyD. So just a quick hats off to you, Ben. Thank you for coming in. Appreciate you. So Ben is actually my cohort. So I'm super excited. Ben actually will be a guest on the podcast, hopefully very soon. He is going to a neuropsychology site. So super excited to get Ben's experience and his wisdom in neuropsychology. So hats off to you, Ben. Thank you for coming through. Appreciate you. Let's see. We got another question. If you would like to practice in the area of health psychology, what internships and settings would you be doing? Yeah, good question. So, if I was to go into the field of health psychology, I'm pretty much wanting to go into the field of health psychology. I would pick any site that is a VA, that is an academic medical setting, or that is a hospital. And the reason being is that a lot of these hospitals, academic medical centers, and VAs are pretty much hospital based in terms of there's patients there that are visiting their primary care doctor for different issues like sleep, tobacco use, alcohol use, substance use. They're there for anxiety, depression, trauma, and they also have a lot of comorbid medical situations. So chronic health conditions like COPD, coronary heart disease. There might be some obesity or weight management issues going on, eating disorders, different things like that. I would go into those settings because those settings have a combination of health related issues along with anxiety, depression, mental health. So anywhere that you can go to that has a combination of mental health and physical health is going to be great in terms of getting that health experience. And so that's what I would be doing if I was you. But I think it's a phenomenal road to go into. I think it's just only increasing and getting larger as time goes on. So definitely cool to look into that. Another question is, do you think the role between neuropsychologist and coaching is too great? The role or the boundary between neuropsychologists and sports coaching is too great. Y Let me know a little bit more what you mean by that. And do you think it's possible to do both for in college? This particularly interests me. So the way that I think what I'm getting in terms of your question is so the difference between a neuropsychologist and a sports coach. So yeah, I mean, I do think that that is a pretty wide variety, almost not necessarily in opposite spectrums, but because neuropsychologists get so much education with a bachelor's, a master's sometimes, as well as a doctorate, the internship, the postdoc, and then even the board certification. I mean, you're looking at anywhere from 9 to 15 or 16 years of school. That's including college, right? After high school. And so their specialty to be able to diagnose mental health disorders, but also to look into neurological disorders like TBI or concussion and related to sports related field, I think is very incredibly valuable. And so the distance is wide, but I do think that with sports coaching, they are starting to include a lot more mental health mindfulness practices for their team and for their athletes, which is great. In fact, I know a lot of sports coaches that have either licensed clinical social worker backgrounds or licensed clinical mental health backgrounds. And so they have a master's in some type of mental health master's level therapy degree. And then they're including or combining that with sports coaching. So I have seen a lot more of that. I think in terms of doing both for college, that would probably depend on the college and would probably depend on what you major in, right? You might be able to major in sports coaching and then minor in psychology. You might be able to major in neuroscience and minor in some type of executive or exercise science or coaching degree. So it really does depend. I can imagine if someone becomes a sports coach, they can work for sports coaching for a while and then go into grad school and get their doctorate or get their master's or do more education on top of that. And they probably would be really competitive for some programs if they already have some sports coaching in mind, because that would count as clinical experience in terms of working with people. So yeah, I think you might be able to look into that. I think that's a great way to look into that and maybe combine those fields together. Okay. I see some clarification right there. Okay, so like an assistant coach while also being a neuropsychologist. I'm not sure if there's many certification options for sports psychology compared to my current counseling program. Oh, I see. All right, so you're going into neuropsychology, but you might do some assistant coaching as well. I'm not sure about that. Yeah, I haven't heard too much about that, but I wouldn't be it wouldn't surprise me if you could do something along those lines that could combine those two fields. I'm not exactly sure what that would look like. The one thing that I would be thinking about is the boundary between that in terms of, if you're working with a team, but you might also be doing assessment at the same time. And so there might be some ethical boundaries with that, right? Typically, neuropsychologists are working with patients and clients, and they have to do a lot of there's ethical guidelines with confidentiality, right? And making sure that the patients that they're working with is in coinciding with multiple relationships. For example, if someone does an assessment with a patient, but they also coach that patient, it might get tricky in terms of figuring out those guidelines. And so, but yeah, I think that'd be really interesting to look into. I'm not, yeah, and to go to your point about the certification for sports psychology, I've mentioned it in other videos. I think the CMPC, I think it's, I forget what it stands for, counseling, mental consulting, coaching. CMPC is the sports coaching link that you can go into that you can tag on to any program that you're a part of, whether it's a counseling program, a clinical psychology program. If you get that certification, it's probably one of the best certifications in the United States to essentially regulate their sports psychologists and to be able to do mental health coaching with consultants. In fact, I know a lot of Olympic programs that are specifically only looking for people that have that certification. So that's one thing to look into if you haven't already. And then after this live stream, I'll put down the links between with all of the things that I've talked about. So hopefully that'll be helpful as well. All right, y'all. So we are coming up on an hour. I think I'm about to log off really soon. Thank you for all of the questions that you put into the chat. Once again, please continue to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Like and share this video if you think it might be helpful for other people. Keep in mind, we're going to be posting a lot more content in terms of helping people to get into grad school. Check out my Instagram, Phil's Guide to PsyD, if you want more information about that. And check out the podcast on Apple and Spotify in terms of some of the interviews that we're going to be doing. So this was great. Awesome, phenomenal questions that you all asked today. Thank you so much again for the support. I'll be logging off now, but we'll be sure to do this live stream again, especially during application season when people are getting ready for internship and also trying to get into clinical psychology school. So look forward to that. I will be checking off and I will see y'all next time.